Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach and Felipe Café, the young people involved in this tragedy, came from different backgrounds. Liana, born in May 1987 in São Paulo, was the elder of two children in a wealthy and respected family. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, was a successful lawyer and a well-known figure in the city. Felipe Silva Café, also from São Paulo, was born in July 1984, but grew up in a large, modest family. From a young age, he worked part-time to support himself and help his family. They met at school and developed a strong friendship that blossomed into romance. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. Liana's parents, who were strict and religious, had brought her up to attend Sunday school and church regularly, and were opposed to her dating at such a young age. Social inequality also contributed significantly to the situation, as she came from a wealthy family while her partner was from a poor background. However, the parents' prohibitions did not deter the young lovers from staying together. Instead, they started secretly dating in various locations where they would not be seen, just to spend some time together. In the fall of 2003, the lovers decided to take a trip to a secluded area to be alone for a while. They carefully planned the trip, which was meant to be an exciting adventure for them. They came up with a believable alibi to justify their absence and avoid arousing suspicion. Felipe told his parents that he and his friends were going on a camping trip. Liana, on the other hand, told her parents that she was going on a sightseeing trip with some guys from church, knowing that they would not question her further. The Friedenbach and Café families believed the fabricated stories and let their children go without any concerns. Liana and Felipe were overjoyed that they could spend a whole week together, free from their parents' scrutiny and judgment. The young couple decided to visit the picturesque province of Iguaçu. They packed lightly, bringing a tent, sleeping bags, some personal items, and a small supply of food. However, they faced a significant challenge. They had hardly any money. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they planned their route in advance to reach their destination by bus. On the morning of October 31st, the lovers met at the agreed meeting point, careful not to be seen by anyone who knew them. They caught the first bus and, after arriving in another city in the evening, spent the night at the bus station. 2 more bus rides took them to their desired location. From there, they had to walk a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the woods where they planned to camp and spend a few days alone together. Despite their fatigue after the long journey, the warm and sunny day put them in high spirits, and they joked, laughed, and made plans for their mini vacation. Once they reached the spot marked on their map, they began setting up their modest but cozy camp. Liana and Felipe's plans were ruined by unwelcome visitors. When they traveled to a remote and secluded area, they didn't consider that poverty and crime often thrive in such places. Their arrival didn't go unnoticed, especially since they were well-dressed and carrying large backpacks and bags as they walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay. They caught the attention of local bandits, Paulo Cesar de Silva Marques, nicknamed Perran Buku, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino, who was only 16 but already led the gang. The bandits were interested in the strangers, particularly the beautiful young girl. They decided that the backpacks likely contained valuables and could be robbed. The bandits secretly followed the couple and watched from the underbrush. Liana and Felipe set up their tent, had a snack, and began to clean up their campsite. The bandits waited in ambush until they were certain no one else would join the couple and that they didn't have any weapons. Perran Buku and Chino then attacked Liana and Felipe, threatening them, and Felipe, frightened, didn't even try to run away or fight back against the unknown attackers. Having thoroughly searched all the bags and backpacks, the criminals found nothing of value. They then decided to demand a ransom from the boys' and girls' relatives. Liana, terrified, quickly revealed that she came from a wealthy family and her father would pay them any amount they demanded. The criminals were thrilled with this development, but lacking experience in such cases, they were unsure how to proceed to get the money and release the prisoners. As they refined their plan, the bandits tried to determine the value of their captives and the ransom they could demand. To prevent escape, they decided to hide the prisoners. Initially, they were taken to a rundown structure near the farm where they were staying, but it lacked windows and doors. Later, they were moved to the home of one of the gang members. There, Felipe was tied up and brutally beaten to prevent escape and resistance. That night, the gang members took turns abusing the bound and helpless Liana, ultimately breaking her spirit. The kidnappers were unable to figure out how to demand and collect a ransom, so they decided to kill the captives and hide their bodies in the woods, making it unlikely they would ever be found. After torturing the kidnappers took them to a remote area in the woods the following day. Pernambuco took the badly beaten Felipe deep into the forest, where a gunshot was heard, and then he returned alone. Liana realized what had happened and that her loved one was dead. Although the kidnappers tried to convince Liana that they had released Felipe, they had other sinister plans in mind for her. They intended to keep her captive as their plaything until they grew tired of her, especially since no one had begun searching for the missing boys at that time. A couple of days after Liana left, her parents discovered that there was no church excursion trip, and her friends were unaware of her whereabouts. The Friedenbach family suspected that Liana had run off with her boyfriend, Felipe, and immediately contacted his parents. However, Felipe's family believed he had gone camping with friends, so they couldn't assist in locating the couple. The situation was complicated by the fact that neither Liana nor Felipe had been in contact for several days, and their phones were turned off. Thanks to the Friedenbach family's connections and resources, they were able to mobilize the entire city's police force to track the couple's trail, step by step. Through trickery, they managed to reconstruct the route the young people took after running away from home. The police arrived at Embu-Guasu, where the last bus had dropped them off, and from there they had to navigate through a deserted wooded area on foot. This was also the last location where their phones were still online. A massive search operation was launched, involving police officers, rescuers, and concerned citizens who had learned about the incident and wanted to help. A local businessman even offered his personal helicopter to aid in the search effort and distributed flyers with photos of the missing pair. The search party quickly found the couple's camp, but what they saw was chilling. Although there were no signs of bloodshed or struggle, it was clear that something horrific had taken place. The contents of their bags had been emptied and scattered about. Their tent had been sliced open from top to bottom with a knife, and the guys' phones were lying nearby. As the rescuers combed through the area, they soon stumbled upon Philippe's lifeless body. The young man had been shot in the back of the head at close range, and it was clear that he had never stood a chance. Although the chances of finding Liana alive were now extremely low, the searchers held on to hope, however slim. Henry Friedenbach actively sought the help of the press to widely publicize the search for Liana, ensuring that as many people as possible were aware of the situation. A substantial reward was offered for any information about her whereabouts, although unfortunately, this did not lead to a breakthrough in the case. Once the criminals had disposed of Felipe, they returned Liana to the same house where they had previously held both her and Felipe captive. By this time, the group of criminals had been joined by their accomplices, Antonio Gano da Silva and Agnaldo Pius Chino. Agnaldo, in particular, callously declared that Liana was now his property and that he had the freedom to do with her as he pleased. He then shockingly invited the others to indulge in their darkest desires with Liana, an invitation that was quickly accepted by the group. A day after the large-scale search operation began, the criminals relocated with their captive Liana to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, another gang member. That evening, they took Liana with them when they went fishing. The ringleader showed a pretense of concern by putting his jacket over her due to the chilly weather. Later that evening, Chino's older brother, who was unaware of his siblings' illegal activities, arrived at the same location. Chino introduced Liana to his brother as his girlfriend, but the brother immediately recognized her as the girl the police were searching for. The brother took Chino aside and warned him that the police were closing in on them. Chino saw this as a warning and decided it was time to eliminate Liana and flee. He deceived Liana by telling her she was free to go and he would escort her to the road. However, he actually led her into the forest where he brutally stabbed her to death with a knife and then crushed her skull with a rock to ensure she was dead. Liana's body was discovered 5 days after the massacre, with no signs of life and severe mutilation. The key piece of evidence was the killer's jacket, which Liana was wearing. The perpetrators were not only cruel, cynical, and ruthless, but also incredibly stupid and short-sighted. Despite their brutality, they did not attempt to flee, hide, or destroy the physical evidence, believing they would never be caught. This overconfidence ultimately led to their quick identification and apprehension by the police. The ringleader, Chino, made a crucial mistake by leaving his jacket on Liana's body, which retained his sweat marks. He then took the murder weapon to his house, washing it and hiding it in the yard. He also tried to wash his blood-stained clothes so he could continue wearing them. However, DNA analysis ultimately linked the gang members to the crime, allowing the police to apprehend them almost simultaneously. The ringleader did not deny his involvement in the crime and instead chose to testify, bragging about kidnapping, abusing, and ultimately killing the victim, Liana. He provided a detailed account of her final days. Following a lengthy trial, most adult members of the criminal gang received severe sentences. However, the ringleader, Chino, was only 16 at the time of the crimes, so he was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a relatively lenient regime. During his incarceration, Chino made multiple escape attempts and exhibited aggressive and inappropriate behavior, which led to a psychiatric evaluation. The examination revealed several mental abnormalities, which cumulatively turned him into a calculating sadist and murderer devoid of pity or remorse. Chino, responsible for the murder of young men, was sent to a secure medical facility for mandatory treatment and rehabilitation despite the family's numerous appeals. His living conditions are now comfortable, with a private room featuring a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He receives 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, and his monthly maintenance costs around approximately $2,500. In recent years, Chino has repeatedly requested his release, arguing that he has completed his treatment and no longer poses a threat to anyone, allowing him to resume his normal life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jamie Melgar. Sandra Melgar often lies in her small prison cell, reflecting on the unexpected turns her life has taken. She never thought she'd become a widow and a suspect in her husband's murder. It's unbelievable that a year and a half after his death, a grand jury indicted her, and nearly 5 years later, a jury convicted her based on circumstantial evidence alone, with no clear motive or physical proof linking her to the crime. At 59, every day since her husband's passing has been a living nightmare. In a recent interview, Sandra said that she still catches herself thinking she'll go back home. Her blue eyes were red and puffy as tears streamed down her pale cheeks. She mentioned wanting to tell him things, forgetting he's gone. It doesn't feel like he's really gone. It's like he's temporarily away or on a trip. She added that she tries not to dwell on it, before pausing tearfully. Sandra has been incarcerated at the William P. Hobby Unit, a women's prison in rural Texas, for the past 10 months. Despite her circumstances, she has managed to stay connected with her friends and family, many of whom remain convinced of her innocence. She regularly talks to her daughter, Elizabeth Liz Melgar Rose, although the noisy prison atmosphere and her soft voice often make their conversations difficult. Sandra also keeps in touch with her friends through letters, and they update her on her Pomeranian, Lola, who was present at her house on the night of the incident. Most weekends, Liz's mother, Sandra, gets to spend a couple of hours with a rotating group of friends and family, thanks to the efforts of one of her closest friends who coordinates these weekly visits. Liz acts as her mother's strongest advocate, taking it upon herself to speak on her behalf and passionately discussing what she sees as a grave injustice that has taken a devastating toll on her mother's life, depriving her of both her husband and her own freedom. Sandra is haunted by the memories of the fateful night of December 23, 2012, when her husband met his tragic end. Her inability to recall the events of that night has sparked suspicions among investigators who find it suspicious. Despite this, Sandra remains resolute in her assertion that she did not commit the crime. As Sandra lies in her prison cell, her thoughts often wander back to the evening she and Jamie had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary on December 23, 2012. That night, Sandra Melgar was jolted awake by the incessant barking of their dogs, her vision blurred as she struggled to orient herself in the dimly lit room. Her body ached and her head throbbed as she lay on the closet floor, her hands and feet bound behind her back, her undergarments soiled. Sandra, at 5 feet 4 inches tall, attempted to stretch out her legs and roll over to look through a gap under her closet door. However, her bindings and the 2 hip replacements she had undergone restricted her movement. Even if she could manage to free herself, a chair had been placed in front of the door to block her access, with the door handle inaccessible from the outside. Inside the bedroom closet, Sandra's husband of 32 years, Jamie Melgar, lay dead, with 31 stab wounds on his hands and chest. The previously white walls of the closet were now stained with blood, and a gray telephone cord had been used to bind his feet together. A medical examiner's report confirmed that Jamie's injuries were all defensive wounds, indicating that he had fought back against his attacker rather than trying to escape. A particularly vicious blow had almost severed his right thumb, which likely caused the extensive blood spatter found in the closet and bedroom. The bedroom was in disarray, with dresser drawers open and contents scattered everywhere. Clothes, books, and pill bottles littered the floor. Sandra's black purse and red wallet had been rummaged through, and their contents were spread out on the blood-stained white comforter. A small white medic stool at the foot of the bed had bloodstains on it, suggesting it had been used as a makeshift surface for the attacker's knife. The back of a nearby wooden chair was also stained with blood. In the jacuzzi bathtub, where Sandra and Jamie had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary the night before, several items bore witness to the tragic events. These included a white blouse, a green towel, and a silver chef knife with a 6-inch blade, all stained with blood droplets. The police later identified this knife as the murder weapon, which had been used just hours before the horrific events unfolded. Sandra and Jamie had been celebrating their 32 years of marriage with a romantic dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant. They had planned to continue their celebration in a relaxing way, with a jacuzzi session accompanied by candles, cocktails, strawberries, and whipped cream. Even after more than 3 decades together, their love for each other remained strong, as Sandra would later tell the authorities. The couple's journey began during their senior year at Lamar High School. Jamie, with his unruly black hair and a somewhat awkward teenage mustache, was immediately drawn to the 17-year-old Sandra, who had blue eyes and blonde hair and sat in front of him in class. At first, Sandra resisted Jamie's advances for weeks, but she eventually agreed to join him and a group of friends for ice skating. Unbeknownst to her, Jamie had orchestrated the whole event, and when she arrived, only Jamie and his best friend were there. The others had mysteriously disappeared. Jamie's charming nature, humor, and penchant for corny jokes eventually won Sandra over. She admired his intelligence, thoughtfulness, and sense of humor, while Jamie appreciated her intelligence, down-to-earth personality and lack of pretentiousness. They soon became inseparable, and in 1980, 2 years after graduating from high school, they got married in a courthouse ceremony in downtown Houston. On the anniversary of their union, Sandra and Jamie spent a romantic evening in their jacuzzi, reminiscing about their shared history and dreaming of their future together. They discussed selling their home to embark on a world tour, visiting iconic destinations like the Grand Canyon and Ireland, and witnessing the breathtaking Northern Lights. With Jamie's retirement as a computer programmer with the Houston Independent School District just 5 months away, they envisioned buying a beachfront property where they could settle down after their travels. As they chatted, they took turns giving each other massages, culminating in a romantic moment of intimacy. After 2 blissful hours in the jacuzzi, their peaceful evening was abruptly interrupted by their dogs barking. Jamie got out of the jacuzzi, wrapped a towel around himself, and put on Sandra's slippers to attend to the dogs. Little did Sandra know that this would be the last time she would see her husband alive. When Sandra woke up approximately 15 hours later, she was horrified to find herself bound and gagged in her closet, her hands and feet tied, her body sore, and her undergarments soiled. Jamie was nowhere to be found, and the frantic barking of their dogs was now accompanied by unfamiliar voices inside her home. Sandra screamed out in desperation. Herman Melgar stood outside his brother Jaime's house, confused, just after 4:30 p.m. His brother had invited him and his family for dinner, but now, despite ringing the doorbell and calling, there was no response from Jaime or his wife Sandra. What struck Herman as unusual was that Jamie's black truck was parked in the driveway and Sandra's silver car was inside the open garage. He told his family to wait by the front door while he took a look around the backyard, glancing over the fence. Noticing the plastic tarp hanging from the pergola on the back porch, Herman remembered that Jamie had been working on various home improvement projects. Returning to the front yard, Herman decided to check the laundry room door inside the garage. To his surprise, the door was unlocked, so he entered the house. As he stepped inside, Herman was met with an unsettling atmosphere. The house was dimly lit, gray and stuffy, with all the blinds drawn shut. The dogs were barking and jumping around, which added to the eerie feeling that Herman's daughter Marissa would later describe as unsettling. It was at that moment that they heard muffled screams. Herman rushed to the back of the house and found a large chair propped against the bathroom closet door. Inside the closet, Sandra lay on the floor, wearing a black satin nightgown, desperately screaming for help. Herman and his wife Maria struggled to remove the tightly bound restraints from Sandra's arms and legs. Herman got a pair of scissors from the bathroom to help free her. Meanwhile, Sandra kept asking about Jamie's whereabouts. She had visible bruises on her arms, including a dark one on her left bicep. After they finally freed her, Sandra rushed into the bedroom and found Jamie's lifeless body protruding from the closet. She checked for a pulse, but it was clear from his cold, pale, and naked body that he had passed away. Sandra covered Jamie's body with a blue jacket, and Maria escorted her back to the bathroom. When the paramedics arrived, Sandra was in hysterics, making it difficult for her to communicate with Stephanie Roberts, the first paramedic to arrive on the scene. Roberts' report stated that Sandra was in shock, cried periodically, and had lost all sense of time. Her last memory was of around 1 a.m. that morning, unaware that 15 hours had passed and it was now evening. The police documented bruises on Sandra's hands and arms, as well as a small scratch on her left thumb, but found no blood on her. Sandra told the police that after Jamie let the dogs in, she got out of the bathtub and went to her closet to get dressed. Her next memory was waking up in the closet at an unknown time, and at some point she screamed for help, but then fell back asleep, possibly having a seizure. Sandra had several underlying medical conditions, including lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and grand mal seizures, which had forced her to resign from her job as a licensed vocational nurse. She believed she could no longer perform her duties effectively due to her seizures. In the weeks leading up to Jamie's murder, Sandra had experienced auras, which she knew were warning signs of an impending seizure. During these seizures, she would sleep for hours and wake up in a state of confusion, disorientation, and severe pain. As crime scene investigators carefully searched the house, Sandra was taken to an interrogation room at the Harris County Sheriff's Office. She mentioned that the room was too cold and was subsequently asked to take a polygraph test. Sergeants Cazal and Douay questioned her for 3 hours, focusing on the 36 hours leading up to Jamie's death. Sandra spoke quietly and complained of a headache during the interrogation. She remembered some details clearly, such as removing her boots in the bedroom, changing in the bathroom, and recalling their conversation in the jacuzzi. However, she struggled to remember other details, and her recollection of time was imprecise. When questioned about the timeline, Sandra initially stated that Jamie had left her for 15 minutes to let the dogs in before she got out of the jacuzzi. Later, she suggested it might have been around 5 minutes. Sandra admitted that she was not good at estimating time and was making an educated guess. 2 days after the murder, Liz met with Cazal and Douay to report that several items were missing from the house, including a TV from the bedroom and Sandra's medication bottles of hydrocodone and phenobarbital. She reminded them that a backpack containing a gaming system and games had been left in the garage, which she had previously mentioned to detectives. Liz also shared information about her mother's seizures and health issues, expressing her concern for her mother's fragile state and possible post-traumatic stress. Although she hoped that something might trigger a memory later, this meeting did not yield any significant breakthroughs. Liz continued to follow up with phone calls, even pointing out damage to one of her parents' rental homes. However, the authorities eventually stopped responding to her inquiries, leaving both Liz and Sandra unaware of the investigation's progress. A year and a half after the incident, Sandra was secretly indicted for Jamie's murder by a grand jury in July 2014. Because of state law, grand jury proceedings are confidential, keeping the public unaware of the discussions and evidence presented during the process. Despite the indictment, Sandra's case progressed slowly over the next 3 years, involving at least 4 prosecutors from the district attorney's office, until it was assigned to Colleen Barnett in May 2017. Colleen Barnett had rejoined the DA's office in January of that year, following a 4-year break during Kim A's tenure as district attorney. Throughout her 24-year career, Barnett had built a reputation as a diligent and fair-minded prosecutor, according to both her colleagues and the attorneys who had opposed her in court. She had handled over 70 murder trials, including the high-profile capital murder case of Suzanne Basso, who was executed for luring a mentally disabled man to Texas with the promise of marriage and then killing him. Barnett knew that Sandra's case was tough. There was no clear motive, no confession, and no direct evidence linking Sandra to the crime. Despite the challenges, Barnett was convinced of Sandra's guilt. During the 13-day trial that began in August 2017, Barnett presented Sandra as a cold-blooded killer who carefully planned Jamie's murder, luring him into their bedroom with the promise of sex. Barnett told the jury that Sandra had used a gray telephone cord to tie Jamie's feet, then fatally stabbed him from chest to neck. The prosecutor highlighted the discovery of a bag of sex toys on the bed, which Sandra later claimed was a joke gift from a friend. Although Barnett couldn't exactly say why Sandra did it, she offered several possible motives, including Jamie's life insurance policy with HISD and Sandra's alleged desire to end their marriage. However, as a Jehovah's Witness, Sandra's religion did not allow divorce. Sandra's attorney, George Ma Sechrist, a well-established and respected legal expert, presented a contrasting image of the seemingly fragile woman sitting at the defense table. According to Sechrist, Sandra was a victim of investigators who had jumped to conclusions, forming a theory within 2 hours of arriving at the crime scene. He backed this claim by pointing out that they had initially attempted to file murder charges while the crime scene investigators were still processing her home. Seacrest emphasized the lack of physical evidence linking Sandra to the crime, highlighting the fact that her blood was not found at the scene and that she had no cuts on her hands. He offered an alternative explanation. Sandra had been the victim of a home invasion, during which she suffered a head injury and was bound in her closet while the intruders killed her husband. For the jurors watching Barnett and Seacrest in the courtroom, the atmosphere was likened to a high-stakes boxing match, as the two lawyers clashed in a battle of wits. Barnett landed a significant blow with the help of Celestina Rossi, a blood spatter expert and crime scene reconstructionist from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. Rossi testified that the evidence at the crime scene contradicted the idea of a home invasion. She highlighted several key points, including the absence of signs of forced entry, the untouched dresser drawers in the bedroom, and a lit candle on Jamie's nightstand, which suggested that no struggle had occurred near the closet where Jamie died. Rossi explained that most of the blood was confined to the closet, with a few exceptions, such as spatter on the back of a chair, the white medical stool, and tiny droplets on the comforter. According to Rossi, this spatter was likely caused by the injury to the artery near Jamie's thumb. Rossi concurred with the medical examiner's report, stating that all of Jamie's wounds were defensive in nature. She also noted that Jamie's loaded handgun was inches from his body in the closet, untouched. Rossi emphasized that in a situation like this, one's instinct is to try to disarm their attacker rather than shoot them, even if they are approaching with a knife. After 8 hours of deliberation spanning several days, the jury, comprising 8 men and 4 women, reached a guilty verdict for Sandra on the charge of murder, sentencing her to 27 years in prison. Although this sentence was shorter than the maximum possible 99 years, it was still a significant sentence. In explaining their decision, the jury foreman later stated that by the time Sandra would be released, she would be in her early 70s and might have the opportunity to see her grandchildren, adding that they considered this decision humane as they did not view Sandra as a threat to society. When District Judge Kelly Johnson announced the verdict, Sandra let out a loud shriek and nearly collapsed into her chair. The courtroom, filled with supporters who had been convinced that the trial was merely a formality to prove Sandra's innocence, was left in stunned disbelief. Despite attempts to reassure Sandra that everything would turn out fine, perhaps to boost their own morale, the reality of the situation suddenly became clear, and everything fell apart. Sandra, clad in a red blazer and relying on a cane, was escorted out of the courtroom, where she paused to share a final emotional hug with Liz. Once they released each other, Liz crumpled to the floor, overwhelmed by grief. Having lost both her father and mother to a justice system she felt had failed them catastrophically, Liz was left feeling utterly alone and devastated. The jury foreman staunchly defended the prosecution's case, arguing it was the most plausible explanation, despite being rooted in speculation and theory. He highlighted the discrepancies in Sandra's account and questioned the legitimacy of her alleged seizure that night. While he conceded it was possible the jury had erred, he ultimately stood by their verdict. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On January 12, 2019, a report emerged regarding the death of 65-year-old Michael Redlick. He was a former NBA executive with the Memphis Grizzlies and a respected professor at the University of Central Florida. Initially believed to have died from a heart attack, it was later revealed that he had been stabbed in the chest. There were speculations about the incident, including the possibility of self-inflicted harm. Forensic experts eventually confirmed that it was a homicide, and Michael's wife was identified as the perpetrator. In June 2022, Michael's wife, Danielle Redlick, went to trial, but the case remained complex. She did not admit to premeditated murder, and her testimony changed throughout the legal proceedings. The legal battle between the prosecution and defense was intense. Danielle Redlick, a 46-year-old woman, She had a petite stature and a slender physique, with chestnut hair that had turned gray either. Before the incident, Danielle was a regular American woman, a mother of two, and a specialist in multimedia communications. She wasn't particularly well known until the crime against her husband brought her into the public eye. Danielle was born in Florida in 1976 and later moved to Cleveland, Ohio with her family. Her upbringing was typical, growing up kind and well-mannered with a personality. Her appreciation for beauty deepened as she grew older. She attended Valencia College and earned an Associate of Arts degree before joining Baldwin Wallace University's psychology department in 1996. In 1996, Danielle's mother remarried, but the marriage was short-lived due to Caitlin's passing from cancer. Caitlin had been battling breast cancer for a while and received quality medical care through her husband's insurance, but unfortunately, the treatment was unsuccessful. After her mother's death, Danielle and her siblings went to live with their stepfather, Michael Redlick. Michael later became Danielle's husband and met his tragic end in 2019. Their relationship started as a friendship and evolved over time as Danielle cared for the younger children and worked part-time jobs. Michael, focused on his career in professional sports, particularly player recruitment, grew attached to the children and developed a strong bond with Danielle. Despite their age gap, their relationship blossomed naturally. Danielle initially kept their relationship hidden from her family, but eventually revealed it. They found happiness and support in each other's company. Michael used his connections to help Danielle secure a job at an advertising agency. With his good income, he devoted all his free time to family activities. The circumstances were favorable for both of them. Mr. Redlick received a job offer as Vice President of Corporate Sales for the Memphis Grizzlies basketball club. This new role required him to move to a different state. He asked Danielle to go with him, but she hesitated due to her studies and attachment to her current lifestyle. She declined, but they maintained their relationship long distance with frequent visits. Michael surprised Danielle by showing her the house he had bought for them, a beautiful cottage near the Mississippi River in a peaceful neighborhood. Eventually, Danielle decided to move in with him. To support her decision, Michael helped Danielle find a job in the radio industry. Looking back, Danielle remembered that everything went smoothly at first. Things only changed later due to Michael's demanding job. Years later, during a trial involving Danielle, her daughter Jaden testified about Michael's vital role as a father in raising them both. They attended prestigious schools with their father's encouragement in sports programs. Jaden had a strong bond with her father, but felt disconnected from her mother, viewing her as problematic. She believed her mother caused conflicts at home, while Michael aimed for family harmony. What caused the discord in their seemingly happy family? Michael's new job brought more responsibilities and stress, leading to a strained relationship with management. He started drinking heavily. Despite Danielle's efforts to support him, Michael's drinking led to conflicts. One significant incident occurred when Michael struck Danielle during an argument. He regretted his actions, seeking immediate medical help for Danielle's injuries. The next day, Michael made a heartfelt gesture to show his remorse and care for Danielle, who forgave him and decided not to report the incident. Despite a strict domestic violence law in the state, Danielle chose not to cause trouble for her husband, as this wasn't the first warning sign. Similar behavior had occurred before. In 2003, the Redlicks had a daughter named Jaden. A year later, they decided to formalize their relationship. Their family life seemed positive, but Michael's work issues persisted, affecting their family dynamics. 7 years later, they welcomed their son Sawyer. The situation between Michael and Danielle grew increasingly tense as Michael started drinking again, leading to more frequent conflicts. One altercation turned physical when he grabbed Danielle by the throat and pinned her against the wall, terrifying her. Unable to bear his violent behavior, Danielle left with the kids to live with her relatives, who initially disapproved of their marriage, but eventually accepted it. Michael visited frequently, asking for forgiveness and urging Danielle to return. After some time, they reconciled, but their relationship remained turbulent as they moved multiple times due to Michael's job opportunities. In 2014, both unemployed and living off savings, they faced another relocation to Indiana. While the prospect of a new home seemed promising, Danielle stayed in California with the children to handle their property sale. The constant moving took a toll on the family, especially the children, who struggled to adapt. Over about a year, their financial situation improved, but the distance strained Michael and Danielle's marriage. They communicated less and grew apart. When they reunited, new challenges arose. Danielle suspected infidelity due to Michael's distant behavior, but he revealed health issues he had been hiding. After trying various treatments, he opted for testosterone injections, revitalizing him physically and mentally, but also making him more aggressive. One night, after an incident of violence, Danielle decided to leave, but Michael begged for forgiveness. Despite the turmoil, they stayed together, raising their children. However, their relationship had changed irreversibly, leading to more conflicts and increased drinking from Michael. His discontent often turned to physical aggression, but Danielle, deeply in love, stayed. The ongoing tension affected her deeply, making her anxious and withdrawn. She found solace in photography. Despite their troubles, the family appeared normal to outsiders. By the end of the year, they settled in Florida, where Michael changed careers. His new job brought stability and joy, though less pay than before. They eventually bought a home in Winter Park, where Danielle preferred the attic to escape Michael's outbursts. Danielle struggled with alcohol addiction, while Michael supported the family. She handled household tasks and the children, isolating herself due to disputes leading to their separation in 2016. Despite this, Michael continued to financially support and visit the children. Danielle found a job at a school where new friends helped her overcome depression and regain independence. Although Michael had freedom to come and go, Danielle still interacted with him. An argument led to Danielle being hospitalized with a concussion. She stayed silent out of fear, but Michael misinterpreted her silence. During questioning, Danielle revealed that in October 2016, Michael had tried to run her over with his car, prompting her to go to the police briefly before leaving due to fear. They reconciled and moved back in together, which had tragic consequences. On January 12, 2019, a 911 call from Danielle reported Michael's apparent heart attack. Upon arrival, authorities found a suspicious scene with a strong cleaning agent smell, a pink liquid bucket, and Michael dead from a knife wound, not a heart attack as claimed. Danielle had wrist cuts, receiving medical attention before police began their investigation. Forensic analysis indicated someone else caused Michael's death, disproving self-harm. The pink liquid was diluted blood, an attempt to conceal evidence that ultimately failed, leaving visible blood splatters in the house. Furthermore, it is important to note that a large knife was found at the entrance of the kitchen, while 3 smaller knives were discovered inside the sink. After doctors confirmed that her injuries were not life-threatening, she was questioned. During the interview, she frequently changed her statements. Initially, she claimed to have thought her husband died of heart disease. Later, she stated he had taken his own life following an argument. However, the evidence refuted her claims, as it is difficult for such a wound to be self-inflicted, and individuals intending to end their lives usually choose simpler and less painful methods. The autopsy revealed that Michael died from blood loss. With timely medical help, his life could have been saved. Additionally, he had a lacerated left eye. Toxicological tests showed high levels of alcohol in his system. The investigation found that a few days before the incident, there was an argument between the spouses witnessed by their elder daughter. Michael had been drinking and burst into the bathroom where Danielle was hiding. However, their daughter Jaden intervened and took the bottle away from him. After this incident, Danielle left the house and returned once her husband had fallen asleep. According to Jaden, it was the first time she had seen such a burst of anger in her father. for which he later apologized multiple times. She still believed he was a loving and caring father, but asserted that her mother often instigated conflicts. The next day, the couple reconciled, and Michael invited his wife and children to a soccer game. However, witnesses noted that Danielle appeared upset and was virtually non-communicative that evening. The parents dropped their kids off at a friend's house for a sleepover and were left alone afterward. Later in the evening, Danielle stopped by McDonald's and returned home around 10:30 p.m. Upon entering the house, she found her husband drunk again. During dinner, Danielle received a message from an unknown man. Michael saw it, bit off a piece of his hamburger, and spat it at his wife. He then attacked her and attempted to strangle her. In self-defense, Danielle grabbed the first thing she could find, a knife, and stabbed him in the chest. He fell and began to bleed profusely. The defendant claimed she immediately called emergency services, but accidentally dialed the wrong number. Her actions were confirmed during the investigation. In a state of shock, she lay down next to Michael and fell asleep until morning. When asked by the prosecution why she lied during the emergency call and questioning, Mrs. Redlick said she was afraid and worried that no one would believe she acted in self-defense. There were reasons for this fear. Shortly before the incident, she had a scuffle with friends. When the police arrived, she resisted, even trying to bite one of them. She also refused to cooperate with the investigation, resulting in charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Danielle had been on probation for about a year. It was also found that the cuts on her wrists were self-inflicted. She claimed she had tried to end her life due to emotional turmoil, but the injuries were superficial and not life-threatening. Therefore, her claims were not believed. Investigators also discovered that Danielle was not a role model. After finding out about Michael's infidelities, she joined a dating site where she interacted with men and was unfaithful in retaliation. Her profile stated she was single. Analysis of messages between Michael and Danielle showed she still loved her husband. Learning of his affairs left her feeling betrayed and disillusioned. She also found out Michael planned to leave her despite his repentance and desire to mend their relationship. Danielle explained she found it difficult to understand and accept her husband's actions. She was heartbroken to realize she had devoted the best years of her life to a man who didn't appreciate her. The prosecution used the information against her in court. They argued that the crime was premeditated, committed in a fit of rage because she couldn't forgive his infidelity and the impending divorce as Mr. Redlick had planned. Neighbors confirmed her frequent fits of anger, noting that the couple often had loud arguments that sometimes turned physical. People who knew them saw Michael in a positive light, viewing him as kind and helpful. On the other hand, Danielle was perceived as quarrelsome. Video evidence displayed her irrationally attacking her husband. Friends and Michael's brother supported this portrayal. One person even remembered calling her crazy, but assured others that things would be fine if steak knives were hidden. Her lawyer argued that her actions were in self-defense, stemming from years of emotional and physical abuse. Family members who witnessed their arguments confirmed Michael's rough and emotionally abusive behavior. They were aware of his frequent physical abuse and humiliation towards her, although not in their presence. Some family members mentioned that Danielle became nervous and quick-tempered only after years of marriage. The prosecution emphasized that she left her husband to die, indicating premeditation. They pointed out that she logged into a dating app the night of the incident, suggesting hatred and resentment, possibly for financial gain. After a divorce, Danielle stood to lose part of their accumulated wealth. At the time of Michael's death, her net worth was estimated at around $1.2 million. Furthermore, it was noted that she frequently changed her statements during the investigation and potentially tampered with evidence. However, the defense argued that Mr. Redlick was a manipulator and predator. Following his first wife's death, he relentlessly pursued his stepdaughter and shaped a young woman to meet his needs. During the investigation, The prosecution offered Danielle a plea deal to admit to manslaughter, which would have resulted in only 10 years of imprisonment. She declined. Even though if found guilty of first or second-degree murder, she faced a life sentence. She kept insisting she was innocent. The trial outcome shocked everyone. On July 17, 2022, the jury gave their verdict. They found Danielle Redlich not guilty of premeditated murder. They believed her actions were in self-defense. However, they did find her guilty of tampering with evidence, for which she received a 5-year suspended sentence. Having already served 3 years, these were credited toward her sentence. On August 5, 2022, when the sentence was announced, the defendant was released in the courtroom. What do you think? Was the verdict fair, or were the jurors misled into believing Danielle's actions were justified? Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Wang Nan. The betrayal of a loved one invariably catches us off guard because we consider people close to us when trust is fully established. With such trust, a stab in the back is unexpected. But what happens if the plan were not fully executed? The victim might be unable to testify due to a serious condition, while the perpetrator frantically tries to cover their tracks without arousing suspicion. It resembles the plot of a thriller, yet, regrettably, this story unfolded a few years ago in real life. This case involved Wang Nan, a pregnant Chinese woman. It became widely known in Thailand. The perpetrator tried to dispose of his wife in a national park and make it appear like a tragic accident. However, nature itself seemed to intervene, saving both the young woman and her child from being killed. When the truth emerged, it shocked not only the detectives on the case, but also the doctors who saved her life. They all believed that her husband was genuinely concerned for his wife and baby. Let's delve deeper into Wang Nan's story. Wang Nan was born in Nanjing, China's former capital and major metropolitan city, in 1987. She grew up in a fairly affluent family where her parents endeavored to provide her with an excellent education and foster the development of her talents and potential. Wang excelled academically, particularly in sciences. After completing school, Wang Nan enrolled at a prestigious university where she pursued studies in business and finance. While mastering several foreign languages during her courses, she also achieved stellar academic records. After receiving her diploma, she secured a position in a prominent travel agency. She swiftly proved herself a valuable, responsible, and highly motivated employee. Her dedication enabled her to climb the career ladder quickly. Before long, she was sent to Thailand to head a new branch and oversee its development. Nan served as a top manager for several years, but decided to leave the travel agency eventually. She pursued her entrepreneurial dreams by opening a Chinese national cuisine restaurant. She managed it so effectively that it grew into a small yet popular chain in Bangkok. Despite nearing 30 years old and living in Thailand for an extended period, Wang didn't let loneliness bother her much. She stayed focused on business and worked tirelessly around the clock. Even though she had learned the local language well enough, she opted to refine her skills further by enrolling in additional courses at a training center. During one of these sessions, Wang met a young man named Yu Xiaodong who couldn't help but stare at her for several minutes before approaching. Speaking native language, they exchanged pleasantries. Yu Xiaodong eventually asked Nan why she was studying this language further. She explained that it was essential for developing her business. Yu then suggested they exchange business cards for future networking opportunities. Although Nan wasn't particularly interested in extending their conversation, out of politeness, she handed him her business card and accepted his in return. His card indicated that Yu Xiaodong operated an export-import business in Bangkok. Wang wasn't particularly impressed and casually tossed the business card into her purse, likely forgetting about it soon after. However, Yu seemed genuinely interested in the young woman and decided to call her the very next day. Nan was busy with work and couldn't spare even a few minutes for a conversation, so she declined his offer to meet for coffee. A few days later, a similar situation occurred, with Nan once again refusing due to her hectic schedule and preparations for an upcoming business conference. She intended to expand her professional network and create new business partnerships there. Yu Xiaodong attended the event with a stunning bouquet of flowers, patiently waiting for an opportunity to approach Nan once she was free. When he did, he asked her out again. This time, Wang Nan was swayed by his persistence. No one had ever tried so hard to gain her attention before. She agreed to meet him for dinner. What followed appeared to be an unforeseen romance. Yu didn't just fall in love with Nan, he seemed utterly captivated by her. He constantly expressed his affection through thoughtful gestures, surprising her with gifts and flowers every morning accompanied by little romantic notes. He also called at least twice daily to wish her good morning and good night. Nan's feelings were mixed. On one hand, she felt annoyed by Yu's persistent attention. On the other hand, she was flattered that someone would go to such lengths to win her over. Unexpectedly, for the first time in a long while, she found herself immersed in a romantic relationship. Yu endeavored not just to court her well, but also aimed for perfection in every aspect of their relationship. He shared many of Wang's interests and viewpoints, learned how to cook her favorite dishes, and sought to make their time together enjoyable by securing tickets to various events. Moreover, he showed readiness to assist with both professional and personal tasks at the first sign of need. Wang Nan could hardly believe her luck. It all felt like something from a movie, but was happening in real life. However, Yu seemed in too much of a hurry. They had only been dating for several months when he began planning their wedding and even thinking up names for potential future children. Wang felt a bit uneasy with this type of. At moments like these, she found herself discussing how they were both in their 30s. At that age, it was natural to start planning for a family and a wedding, even without rings and veils. Nan, unsure of how to act or respond to her suitor's behavior, acknowledged that he was right about their age. Still, she harbored doubts about whether he was the person to marry. After yet another deep, heartfelt discussion where Nan candidly expressed her uncertainties, Yu assured her that he would demonstrate his love that very night. Once home, the man in love sent his girlfriend a lengthy and touching letter filled with tenderness. He confessed his love for her and promised to be the best husband and father to their future children. The next morning, Wang found her suitor standing on her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. Xiaodong declared that he had never been so serious in his intentions and was ready to marry her immediately. Nan pointed out that the courthouse wouldn't open for another hour and a half. To this, Yu suggested going there right away, stating that if the door was open, they would get married immediately. Wang agreed to this venture, confident that the government office would be closed. To her astonishment, the door was indeed open, and the officer authorized to register marriages was already at his desk. It later became clear that Yu had arranged everything in advance by requesting an early exception for him and his bride. Their wedding proved strange. No guests attended, there were no rings or formal dress. Even memorable photos were absent. Wang Nan couldn't shake off the feeling that nothing about this felt genuine, since she hadn't even introduced her chosen partner to her mother, with whom she had always been very close. As she regained awareness of the situation, she found herself holding a marriage certificate. Next to her stood a satisfied and smiling newlywed husband. In June 2019, a tragic accident occurred when Wang was 3 months pregnant. Her husband persuaded her to arrange a vacation and go on a small trip, reasoning that after the birth of the baby, they would not be able to get out anywhere for a long time. Nan reluctantly agreed, and they chose the Thai National Park Reserve, famous for its picturesque forests and unique rock paintings, the age of which is estimated at tens of thousands of years. However, on the morning of June 9th, tragedy struck. The couple were on one of the observation decks admiring the sunrise, when Wang Nan suddenly fell from a height of 1 feet. When rescuers arrived at the scene, a crying man ran up to them and begged for medics to save his wife and the baby. The man said they were enjoying the first rays of the rising sun when suddenly his wife felt sick. She took a step to the side but became dizzy and fell before he could catch her. The young woman had fallen from a height equivalent to 10 floors. She had several open fractures, and the situation seemed hopeless. But then, unexpectedly, Nan groaned and opened her eyes. Her husband immediately stopped crying and wailing. A look of horror appeared on his face. However, he quickly composed himself, expressed immense relief that his beloved was alive by thanking Providence loudly, and then leaned in to whisper something in Chinese into her ear. Before delving into that tragic day's events further, let's rewind 6 months to understand how their family life was unfolding. Wang regretted her marriage almost immediately after it was registered. Initially, she hoped Yu would be a good husband, reliable support, and someone she could rely on. Unfortunately, these hopes were dashed as her new husband revealed his true nature soon after. He spent almost all his time at home playing computer games and willingly used his wife's money without contributing anything to the family budget. When questioned about not working, Xiaodong replied that his business was in a seasonal lull and claimed he could rest for now. However, this lull extended too long for comfort. Curious about her husband's work claims, the young woman decided to investigate further. That's when she discovered that his so-called successful export-import existed only on paper and printed business cards. At that moment, Wang comprehended the enormity of the mistake she had made. She hadn't even considered drafting a prenup agreement, so now her husband could freely spend what she earned. In case of a divorce, he would claim her property. The couple had a serious conversation during which he cried like a child and assured her that he had temporary difficulties but would definitely improve and find a good job. However, it soon became evident that he wasn't planning to seek employment and felt quite comfortable living off his wife's earnings. He behaved like a child, spending most of his time playing computer games. If he did something around the house or helped his wife at the restaurant, he always asked for money for his own needs. Wang eventually grew tired of this behavior and informed him that she would no longer give him any money until he found a job. Following this confrontation, he disappeared. Along with him went Nan's marriage certificate and identity card, though she only noticed the missing documents in the evening when her accountant called about the transfer of a significant sum from her account. The young woman was shocked because she hadn't authorized any transfer. She quickly suspected who was responsible. The amount involved was more than $500,000, which her husband had moved to his personal account using their marriage certificate, her documents, and assurances that it was their joint money managed together. Wang didn't hesitate to report the theft to the police. The fugitive husband was tracked down within hours as he attempted to withdraw some of the funds at a station. He sobbed again and knelt, begging for his wife's forgiveness. He admitted to losing a large sum gambling and claimed debts threatened his life if not repaid. Additionally, it turned out this wasn't his first run-in with the law. Back in China, he had served 8 years for robbery. Nan nearly burned with shame at this revelation. When she listened to all this, it turned out she did not know the man she married. However, the young woman felt that gambling is a disease and believed she must help her husband overcome this addiction and return to normal life. Wang agreed to pay off half of her husband's debt and made him the manager of one of her restaurants. At first, Yu Xiaodong accepted it gratefully and took on his new position responsibly. He even developed a good strategy for the establishment's growth. But his enthusiasm didn't last long. Soon, he started spending more time playing computer games and seeking out entertainment. Around that time, Wang discovered she was pregnant. She informed her husband, but he reacted strangely and even aggressively. Yu said he wasn't ready for this and persuaded his wife to have an abortion, which she categorically refused. Then, her husband threatened divorce and said he intended to seek a division of property through the court. He didn't speak to his wife for several days, but then suddenly softened and apologized. Yu admitted that he spoke out of emotion and was actually happy about the upcoming edition. He began showing care again by cooking and helping around the house. 2 months later, Wang was absolutely happy because her marriage seemed almost perfect, just as promised by her lover at the beginning of their relationship. He was attentive, caring, fulfilled his job as manager responsibly, and actively prepared their home for the child's arrival. One day, Xiaodong suggested ensuring Wang's life and health because she was pregnant. Such a step would protect both her and the baby in case of various unforeseen situations. The young woman agreed readily and even wondered why she hadn't thought of it before. The insurance was taken out the very next day, and a couple of weeks later, Yu talked about taking a vacation to relax and unwind. Wang was hesitant at first, but her husband insisted they hadn't had a honeymoon yet. With a baby on the way, traveling wouldn't be possible in coming years. He mentioned that they had gone through a difficult period and needed to reset to dispel all the negativity and heavy thoughts. In the end, his arguments proved convincing, so Nan agreed. Her husband chose the place himself, booked the hotel, mapped out the activities, and planned the itineraries meticulously. He ensured the trip would be exciting, but not too exhausting for his pregnant wife. Nan entrusted everything to her husband and was pleased to see how enthusiastic he was about planning their vacation. On June 7th, the couple arrived at the park for the first time and spent most of the day there. They walked a lot and visited numerous beautiful sights and lookouts. That summer Friday evening, the park was teeming with visitors. Towards evening, Wang noticed that her husband was getting visibly angry and nervous. When she asked if everything was all right, he replied that due to the crowd of tourists, they couldn't have privacy or enjoy the sunset in silence. Relenting eventually, Wang Nan decided it would be very romantic as the sun set since fewer people were around. Yu Xiaodong climbed the fence of the observation deck and called his wife to join him at the edge, promising an incredible view. However, Wang refused because it was already dark and could be dangerous. Though initially upset, her husband returned after a few minutes and suggested they come back to meet sunrise at the park. Since they returned to their hotel well past midnight on Friday, they decided to rest on Saturday and head back early Sunday morning as planned. Early Sunday morning on June 9th, they went to admire the rising sun at the national park. Waking up around 3 a.m. while it was still dark outside meant there were hardly any visitors. For a moment, Nan thought they were all alone there. The couple witnessed dawn from one of the observation decks before Yu Xiaodong descended towards a cliff, persuading his wife to join him in admiring rock paintings. Initially hesitant, Nan approached cautiously upon her husband's assurances regarding safety. The view from up there was indeed mesmerizing. Yu Xiaodong hugged his wife, then suddenly asked if she regretted anything in life. Surprised by such an inquiry, but confident nonetheless, Nan responded that she didn't regret anything. Yu Xiaodong gently ran his hand through his wife's hair, kissed her on the cheek, and leaned in close to whisper in her ear, "Die." At that moment, he let go of her and pushed her off the cliff. His surroundings once more to ensure there were no witnesses. Airing down, he could pinpoint where exactly she had fallen. He listened carefully. There were no screams or cries for help. This confirmed there were no witnesses below either. Yu Xiaodong then calmly made his way toward the park exit, intending to report the incident later when Wang was surely dead. However, a few hikers who had strayed off the trail discovered Wang's body on the rocks and immediately notified rescuers. By this time, Yu Xiaodong had already left the scents. As several emergency vehicles sped past him with sirens blaring, he quickly realized what was happening and returned to the scene. Upon reaching the site where his wife had fallen, he put on a convincing display of grief. Tears, screams, and desperate pleas for help ensued. Believing his wife was dead, he felt assured that no one would uncover the truth. But during the fall, Wang was caught by tree branches, slowing her descent. She first landed on bushes before rolling onto rocks. This sequence cushioned her fall and saved both her life and that of their unborn child, though she sustained serious injuries. As Yu Xiaodong continued his lamentations about not wanting to live without his beloved wife and child, she unexpectedly opened her eyes and attempted to speak, but couldn't form words. Observers noted the genuine terror on Yu Xiaodong's face, but saw him quickly regain composure as he leaned over her again, hissing in Chinese for her to remain silent if she wished to live. Attempts to finalize his grim intentions failed. Wang suffered severe head trauma, multiple closed and open fractures, numerous lacerations and contusions of soft tissue, and ruptured internal organs, leading to massive blood loss. Additionally, her spine was critically damaged. Doctors feared that even if she survived, she might never walk again. Wang spent several days in a coma, hooked up to life support machines, as medical staff worked tirelessly to save her life. During this time, her husband never left her side, spending both days and nights in her room. The doctors praised his dedication and love. However, when Yu Xiaodong was alone with his wife, he contemplated how to end her life without raising suspicion. He examined the medical equipment thoroughly, but couldn't figure out how to disable it discreetly. The horrifying truth and the tragic loss of a child became evident when Wang regained consciousness. Her husband was terrified, not leaving her alone for a moment, fearing she might reveal the truth to the police at any time. When alone with her, he threatened her again, stating he had nothing left to lose. In the initial interrogation, Wang corroborated her husband's story, saying that dizziness caused her fall. Yet a few hours later, when her husband out briefly, she asked a nurse to call the police and ensure he didn't enter her room. That's when she recounted the harrowing story of how he had tried to kill her. Yu Xiaodong stormed into the room, claiming she was delusional due to head trauma and asserting he'd never harm her or their baby. His statement seemed highly unconvincing, and he was taken into custody that same day. He faced multiple charges, including attempted murder and intimidation. When her husband was arrested and jailed awaiting trial, Wang felt a profound relief. Though she faced an extended period of rehabilitation ahead of her, she now felt secure. Initially hopeful that her pregnancy could be saved, since the baby survived the fall from such heights, complications arose. Due to potent painkillers, several surgeries under general anesthesia, and required antibiotics use, doctors recommended an abortion, prioritizing Wang's health, as survival chances for the fetus were minimal due to drug exposure. It was a significant shock for Nan, but she adhered to the doctor's recommendations. Throughout the trial and sentencing, Xiaodong consistently denied his guilt. In prison, he remained calm, hired skilled lawyers, and was confident he would escape punishment, or that it wouldn't be too severe. Investigators and the prosecutor in charge of the case had no doubt that he committed the crime out of interest, hoping to receive a large insurance payout and inherit his wife's fortune, which at that time amounted to almost $2.5 million. However, during one of the interrogations, Xiao shocked everyone by revealing another motive for his inhumane act. It turns out he held resentment towards his wife when she agreed to repay only half of his debt accrued due to a passion for gambling. In his opinion, if his wife truly loved him, she would have settled all his debts because she had the money. He then decided Wang did not love him and felt justified in punishing her for it. After these revelations, Xiao fell silent and claimed he had been misunderstood. But this unexpected confession, coupled with Nan's testimony, was sufficient to send him to prison for a long duration. By March 2021, Xiaodong was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, Xiao and his legal team filed several appeals. Just 6 months later, the Thai court demonstrated surprising leniency by reducing the life sentence to just 10 years in prison. Nan and her loved ones were deeply shocked by this decision. They expressed concerns that such leniency could set a dangerous precedent and might encourage others to commit similar horrific acts. Around that same period in Thailand, on Phuket Island, a comparable case took place where a Chinese national drowned his wife while claiming it was a swimming accident on the beach. He also did it for insurance purposes since the murder was proven. Consequently, the man received a death sentence. Xiaodong, on the other hand, was sentenced to just 10 years for the failed murder attempt and for the murder of the fetus. What's Wang Nan's current status? Well, as of now, there's been no final verdict in her case. She's serving her 10-year sentence, and the injured woman is trying to challenge the court's decision in parallel. Yu Xiaodong is also appealing to prove his innocence and secure his release. He stood up for his numerous relatives who claimed he was a wealthy businessman and that Wang married him with selfish motives. However, there's no proof of this. The man has nothing but significant debts. As for Nan, contrary to doctors' predictions, after several complicated surgeries and lengthy rehabilitation, she managed to get back on her feet. She relearned how to walk. Most of her earnings went towards her recovery. In 2023, she resumed work and revitalized her previously successful business. She has also established and leads an organization to help women who are victims of domestic violence. Additionally, she runs a blog aimed at warning women against making the same mistakes she made. Georgina Kruger was born on April 11, 1992 in Munich. Georgina, often called Jorodzina, was the middle child in a simple household. She had an older brother named Tommy, who was 8 years her senior, and a younger sister named Michelle, who was 2.5 years younger. When Jorodzina turned 11, her parents decided to divorce. Tommy then chose to live with their father at age 19. After the separation, Jorodzina and Michelle were primarily raised by their mother, Vesna, and maternal grandmother. Both girls excelled academically and participated in music and dance activities, displaying distinct creativity. The family lived modestly. Although their father stayed in touch with his ex-wife and daughters, his focus largely remained on supporting his elder son through educational pursuits and other endeavors. In June 2006, Vesna relocated with her mother and daughters to Berlin after securing a well-paying job there. They moved into Moabit district at house number 8 on Stendal Street. On September 1st that year, both sisters enrolled at one of the best local schools accessible by bus, despite being situated in another district. Vesna adapted well to her new job and had ambitious plans for their future until unforeseen events disrupted their peaceful existence abruptly. From an early age, Jorodzina harbored a dream of becoming an actress. She loved to sing and dance, dedicating herself wholeheartedly and taking these pursuits very seriously. Inspired by Indian films, she envisioned a career in acting and enthusiastically participated in school theater, attending acting and stage speech courses. Her teachers recognized her talent, forecasting future success and fame for her. Furthermore, Jorodzina possessed a bright, expressive appearance, characterized by a slender feminine figure and notable height for her age. She meticulously cared for herself, keeping abreast of fashion trends and striving to dress stylishly. Jorodzina skillfully applied decorative cosmetics, remarkably well, akin to professional makeup artists. Often back in Munich, she would apply makeup for friends and neighbors with precision. During the summer holidays in Berlin, Jorodzina actively attended various casting calls in attempts to make her breakthrough onto the big screen or television. Though she managed to appear in crowd scenes several times, these roles were quite minor. However, on Friday, September 22, 2006, fortune finally favored her. Jorodzina auditioned for a guest role in the television series Turkish for Beginners, and her candidacy was approved. She was scheduled to receive a callback on Monday, September 25th, to finalize her inclusion in the cast. This callback was set to discuss further details and extend an invitation for contract signing. Jorodzina, the new beauty in town, made a noticeable impact from her very first day at her new school. She immediately captured the attention of all the boys her class. However, when it came to interacting with the girls, she faced significant challenges. They openly envied her and saw her as a competitor. As a result, her classmates were slow to welcome her into their group and often communicated with her reluctantly. Despite these obstacles, Jorodzina remained sociable, friendly, and approachable. She avoided conflicts and tried hard to interact with everyone in the class. This teenage girl wasn't just beautiful. She danced well, sang wonderfully, and even received an offer from a modeling agency to become a photo model. She agreed to the offer, but unfortunately missed the planned photo session scheduled for early October. Jorodzina harbored dreams of making it big in Hollywood or Bollywood one day. She envisioned herself walking on the red carpets of prestigious film festivals amidst celebrities, dreaming of fame, recognition, and film awards. To achieve these aspirations, she was prepared to work diligently on herself. Just as these dreams seemed within reach, Georgina suddenly disappeared without a trace, a few miles from home. At that time, she was awaiting confirmation for a role in a TV series and had no doubts about securing it. Throughout that weekend, Georgina could think of nothing else but the anticipated call from the studio that would decide her future. She was filled with excitement and inspiration, already imagining herself on set, preparing for her lines. On Monday morning, September 25th, as usual, she headed to school. She was expected back home by 2 p.m., and since the call was expected later that afternoon, Georgina asked her grandmother to answer all calls in her absence. The day felt endlessly long for Kruger. Georgina's classmates noticed she kept checking the time and seemed unable to focus on her lessons. Given that she had told no one about her casting opportunity, everyone interpreted her anxious state differently. After school ended for the day, Georgina gathered her belongings swiftly and rushed to the nearest bus stop. She boarded bus number 27, which she rode daily, and headed towards home. After traveling 3 stops, she got off at Rue Rov, not far from where she lived. Georgina Kruger never made it home. Vanishing somewhere halfway from the bus stop to her apartment, she was never seen again, neither alive nor deceased. By 2 in the afternoon, her grandmother, who was waiting for Georgina and her sister, had prepared lunch and set the table. Georgina was expected first, with Michelle arriving a bit later due to extra classes at music school. It was strange when Georgina did not show up because she had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3, the grandmother grew anxious and began calling Georgina, only to find her phone turned off. Subsequent attempts also failed. Anxiety grew further as more time passed. When Georgina's mother returned from work and learned about her daughter's disappearance and unreachable mobile phone, she immediately sensed that something serious had occurred. The first step was contacting the school, where it was confirmed that Georgina had attended all her classes and left by bus as usual. The mother then reached out to several of Georgina's friends, hoping that she might have been delayed talking or stopping at a cafe on her way home. However, all friends confirmed that Georgina appeared in a hurry and headed straight home. Increasingly concerned, they proceeded to the police station and reported the disappearance of the 14-year-old girl. Initially skeptical, law enforcement suspected that Georgina might have gone on a date or visited friends or perhaps argued with a classmate and was sulking alone somewhere. Exhausting all possible scenarios and verifying that the teenager wasn't found in any anticipated locations, detectives then began checking accident reports and calling hospitals, assuming she might have encountered trouble on her way home from school. Yet there were no hospital records for Georgina either. As night approached, extensive searches and witness interviews commenced. It turned out that the last sighting of Georgina was at the bus stop. When she got off the bus and turned the street leading to her home, the schoolgirl was dressed in blue jeans with wear marks, a light blue t-shirt, a denim jacket, and gray sneakers. She carried a pink sports bag with a long, wide strap containing her notebooks, textbooks, and mobile phone. Investigators tracked the girl's movements through her device's signal. She spent the entire day at school, then boarded the bus and got off at her stop. However, approximately halfway to her home, the signal suddenly vanished and never reappeared. The search began on Stendhal Street, where the Kruger family lived. A search team with dogs trained to detect both living and deceased humans was dispatched there. At that point, there was still hope of finding the teenage girl alive and unharmed. Law enforcement checked every home, interviewed all residents and potential witnesses, inspected attics and basements, and spoke with workers at local stores and cafes. No one had seen Georgina. Even dogs couldn't pick up her trail. By the next morning, flyers with the schoolgirl's photo and requests for any information about her were posted all over the city. Dozens of calls came into the police station, reporting sightings of a similarly looking girl in different parts of the city. Unfortunately, all leads turned out to be false. Investigators also began to follow up on all previously convicted local residents, as well as those released on bail. Special attention was given to criminals who had shown an unhealthy interest in minors. However, all these efforts yielded no results. The schoolgirl seemed to have vanished into thin air, not making it home, no traces or personal belongings found, as if she had never existed at all. After several months of fruitless searching, the investigation was suspended due to lack of leads, not a single clue, and no direction left to pursue. About a year after Georgina disappeared, someone called the police anonymously. The caller said her body was at the bottom of a nearby lake. Law enforcement couldn't figure out who made the call, but they decided to check it out anyway. For weeks, skilled divers went through the lake with advanced equipment. They were thorough, examining almost every inch of the lake bed. They found nothing. It was a false lead. Despite this, it got the public interested in the case again. The media began discussing and writing about Georgina's disappearance once more. So another search operation was set up. The police talked to neighbors again and brought in search dogs, although hopes were low since the dogs had not picked up her scent on the day she vanished. A year later, investigators were fairly sure Georgina was no longer alive. However, her family didn't believe it. Her mother made up a story for herself that her daughter had run away to India and was now in Bollywood films, dancing and singing as she always wanted to. These thoughts comforted her mother and helped her carry on for the sake of her younger daughter. Efforts to find Georgina resumed from time to time. In 2016, nearly 10 years after she vanished, a resident of Stendhal Street contacted police about a troubling neighbor who invited underage girls over regularly. This neighbor was a 35-year-old Turkish immigrant named Ali K. Publicly, Ali K appeared to be an exemplary family man. He was married and raising 3 kids. But closer investigation worried police officers as they delved into his background and personality. 4 years earlier, he had already been under suspicion and investigated by authorities due to concerning behavior patterns. At that time, he deceitfully lured a local schoolgirl by promising to sell her a trendy smartphone at a symbolic price. He took the girl to his storeroom, located in the basement of the apartment building. There, he struck her on the head and coerced her into intimate closeness. Afterward, he made the teenager swear she wouldn't tell anyone about what happened. He then her a paper napkin to wipe her tears and helped her tidy up before leaving. The girl promised to remain silent, just to escape from his clutches. But as soon as she was free, she immediately told her parents about the incident, and together they went to the police to report the violent actions. The schoolgirl detailed the man's storeroom in the basement, noting that it looked more like a maniac's den. Ali was arrested that same day, but vehemently denied his guilt and shared his own version of the events. According to him, he was indeed selling the gadget, and the girl herself expressed a desire to buy it. As the smartphone was in his basement storeroom, they went down together. When the guest examined the device, she said that she had always dreamed of such a gadget, but since she didn't have the money, she was ready to pay in another way. Following this, according to Ali, the girl began kissing him and started undressing. He tried reasoning with her, but ended up pushing her away forcefully, causing her to fall and hit her head. This explained the injury and bruises on her body. However, the fact of intimate closeness could not be proven, as Ali had used a contraceptive, which he later disposed of. Ali's wife Melik fully supported her husband and also began accusing the girl of indecent behavior and attempts to seduce her husband. Ultimately, Ali received only a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. Nonetheless, as soon as the police took up investigation into the disappearance of Kruger again, they decided to check him thoroughly once more. Ali K did not have a permanent job and got by on odd jobs, mainly living on benefits. He loved gambling and often incurred debts. Being a regular visitor at a Turkish coffee shop on the ground floor of his building allowed him to make acquaintances who who treated him to food and drinks. Despite his precarious lifestyle, Ali carefully maintained his appearance, desperately trying to look younger than his years, wearing fashionable clothes even if it meant spending children's benefits on them. The main oddity about Ali K was his attraction to young girls, which raised several flags during this renewed investigation into Kruger's disappearance. To ensure that the suspect wouldn't become suspicious and would feel secure, a special agent codenamed Hakan was prepared and sent in. He posed as a successful businessman who had recently moved to the Moabit area to open a car service station. A few times, he visited the cafe in Ali's building, loudly discussing business plans and details with a partner. As they left, the partner mentioned the need to find a manager soon, noting that it was a well-paying position and that it was important to choose wisely. After these words, the second man left, while Hakan stayed to finish his coffee. Suddenly, Ali approached and sat at his table. He immediately offered himself for the manager position. A conversation ensued, which quickly turned into a casual chat. The businessman noted that Ali might fit the role and then mentioned the salary. Ali's eyes lit up at the figure. He began dreaming of paying off his debts and buying the sports car he had always wanted. The men exchanged phone numbers, and from that day on, they began communicating regularly. Their relationship quickly grew into a friendship. Hakan even started taking Ali on business trips to other cities, aiming to get closer to him and gain his trust. But this friendship had an unexpected effect. As the suspect tried to appear as the best version of himself to his prospective employer, he boasted of his achievements, even minor ones, and preferred to stay silent about any wrongful acts. Several months later, realizing that the case was not progressing, the investigation decided to introduce another agent, this time a woman who would play Hakan's girlfriend. This introduced Susan into the scenario. Her goal was to befriend Ali's wife Melik and try uncover any secrets her husband might be keeping. It only took a few meetings for them all to get along well, after which all four started socializing as families. Melik was sociable, but regarded her husband as nearly a saint. For years, she had turned a blind eye to his infidelities, did not believe the schoolgirl who accused him of violence, and remained convinced her husband was simply unlucky with jobs, despite being a very good person in her eyes. But now, everything would change soon. Susan realized that Ali's wife wasn't just covering for him. She truly believed he was incapable of harming. The agents decided to use a trick by spreading a rumor that progress had been made in the Crew case, and an unnamed source had indicated where to find her body. Hakan left a newspaper with this article in his car, which Ali had started borrowing occasionally. Several cameras and recording devices were also installed in this car. When the suspect and his wife got into the car, she soon noticed the newspaper left behind, quickly skimmed the article, showed a bit of surprise that the case was still being investigated, and then, indifferently, put the paper aside. It became clear that Melik knew nothing about this. Otherwise, she would have inadvertently revealed herself. 6 months later, the investigation finally concluded that their plan had failed. The K family had become friends with the agents, even trusting them to look after their children. But no confessions were forthcoming. Ali strived to appear honest and upright, and his wife was simply unaware of the crime her husband had committed. Maintaining their cover was becoming increasingly expensive. They even had to lease a space for the supposed auto repair shop and sign a sham employment contract with Ali to avoid raising his suspicions. The investigation then took a desperate last step by introducing another agent who would play a villainous role. According to the backstory, his name was Kor. He was Hakan's cousin, had a criminal record, and was running some underground business. The hope was that Ali, meeting a kindred spirit, would open up and confess his sins. The men quickly bonded over their shared interests. Kor treated his new friend to drinks, and together they visited various clubs and houses of ill repute. The new friend confessed that he made money through not entirely legal means and thus wanted to spend it indulgently, with Ali willingly helping him in this endeavor. Simultaneously, Kor constantly complained about his girlfriend, with whom he supposedly could not break up because she was blackmailing him and threatening to report his illegal business to the police, according to him. She was constantly demanding money, and her needs were growing. One day, while having drinks with a friend, Kaur declared that he intended to rid himself of the bothersome blackmailing girlfriend in a radical way and was willing to pay 100,000 euros to anyone who would do the work. Ali perked up at this and offered to take on the task himself. His friend agreed but suggested they discuss the details in a secluded place when sober. In November 2017, during a monstrous confession while sitting in a car, the men discussed the plan to eliminate Kaur's nuisance girlfriend. At one point, Kaur doubted whether Ali was capable of taking a life. In response, Ali revealed something he claimed no one else knew. He confessed that more than 11 years ago, he had taken someone's life with his bare hands. Ali stated that in 2006, a stunning young girl had moved onto his street and completely captivated him. She passed by his house twice a day on her way to and from school, so he memorized her schedule and would step out to greet her and pay compliments. Despite her young age, he described her as attractive and felt intense desire for her. One warm September day, when the girl was returning from school and the street was unusually quiet and deserted, Ali saw his chance. He asked a neighbor girl to help him move some items from his storage area, and she kindly agreed, not sensing any danger. Once they were in the basement, he locked the door and tried to kiss the schoolgirl who struggled and screamed. He then knocked her unconscious with a blow to the head and took advantage of her. After the incident, afraid she might report him to the police, he decided not to let her go. He grabbed her throat with his hands and squeezed as hard as he could. Ali described this process in detail, explaining how he felt the crunch and sensed the pulse in her neck fade away. The girl's body lay in the basement for several days. If the search team had looked into his storage area during this time, they would have immediately uncovered the perpetrator, but no one suspected anything, and once more, the commotion had died down. He wrapped the body in an old rug and disposed of it in a garbage bin, which went directly to the landfill. Ali's confessions were recorded on a camera installed in Kaur's car. By the evening of that same day, he was taken into. Unfortunately, the girl's remains were never found, as the waste at the landfill was regularly incinerated. Her body was essentially cremated. The trial and verdict. The hearings in this case lasted another 2.5 years before a final verdict was delivered. The criminal adamantly denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he had fabricated the entire story to gain Kaur's trust. In reality, he planned to rescue his girlfriend by turning in his friend to the police as soon as he received the money. No additional evidence was found besides the criminal's own confession. However, his detailed and vivid account was enough to convince the jury of his guilt. In March 2020, nearly 14 years after Joradzina's disappearance, Ali K was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of ever being released. His wife Malik never believed in her husband's guilt, convinced that he had implicated himself while pursuing a noble cause.